I'm a big believer in cognitive and assessments, especially when they are done very well, because I do think that there is a lot of times that, and assessments don't mean to do this, and there's a lot of work trying to make sure that they don't, but sometimes it's just really hard to build it out, which is that we make judgment calls based off of not always intelligence, but based off of what a person knows about the world we live in. That's why sometimes you'll pick a lot of people who go to the same college and university you do, or who came from the same background you did. Like, boy, if we all worked at Deloitte before, we all kind of have the same framework for how we do work, right? And you miss some really amazing people who maybe don't understand what the word framework, entails in your context, but could run circles around you in the sense of what should be in that framework, right? Because they're just really good. And so cognitive assessments are really great ways of sort of getting at some of those sort of diamonds in the rough, right?
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome, everyone, to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of this week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. We're here recording today on February 11th, 2026, almost Valentine's Day. So by the time you hear this, we'll be past Valentine's Day. Bringing you all the news you can use this week. And I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group, a research advisory firm if you haven't worked with us previously. And joining me today is my co-host, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, I thought we'd get away with a little bit easier week this week, but I did send through a few things at like 6 o'clock this morning. Lots of changes in just the last couple of days, right?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. First, I want to say that we did a great job coordinating for Valentine's Day in our pink. If you listen to us as a podcast, we also have a YouTube video. You can always see our pink. We celebrate Valentine's Day all year round. What's interesting though is that the big news this week is people related.
Yeah.
Usually it's acquisitions or some big, story from the courts or something like that, but that is not the case.
There's a few acquisitions, but most of this is people transitioning this week, and some big people transitioning.
Yes.
That doesn't sound right. Some big names of people.
5'11" or so.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a busy week. But before we jump into that, do we want to talk a little bit about where we're going to be at in upcoming seasons, or are we doing that at the end of the show again this year?
We'll do that at the end. This is a big one. People are going to want to get into it. But I will mention, though, that the survey is about to kick off for 2026 for the 2026-2027 data set, but we still have lots of good information. In fact, we're going to talk about how some of this is now sort of being proven out later on, but you can go see that on our website. This last survey was the biggest yet. We're hoping to even surpass that. Had over 10,000 people take it. Over 4,600 organizations, unique organizations, provided us their data. Thank you for that. We hope that if you took it, you'll take it again this year. But we've also broken it down into segments now that it's 380 pages. Understand that might be a little much, but still thank you for all those who read it all the way through. But you can go check out the segments that are most interesting to you. And be on the lookout because if you are getting it from one of our distributor links, that'll be April 15th. So that's only a couple more episodes of this show before you'll be hearing it. I know.
I just think how fast everything goes, especially when I go in 2-week increments, right, at this point. Yes, right. No, you're right.
And then the public launch on the April 29th.
Which means by the time you listen to this, if you are a distributor, one, make sure you are signed up because you're going to miss the boat. And that's a big thing because you want to make sure for most companies over 1,000 customers, we generally get that data in organically because we've got so many distributors. But if you don't have over 1,000 customers and you want to get your data into the data set, and again, you have to have at least 20, 30 responses in general, depending on the category, to kind of make one of our data sets. Just make sure, you be a distributor and associations, media outlets, it's everybody that we are interested in here. We are kicking off a new thing this year, so keep an eye out for it, called Friends of the Survey. This is more of a individual contributor model for people who have a lot of people who they know, who they'd like to help participate, who also would like to get access to the paper in different ways. I was just saying this is probably a great tool for like smaller brokerages, smaller consulting firms. Also, even if you're just someone who is on LinkedIn a lot and you have a lot of people who follow what you're saying, it's a way to kind of participate and get into a little bit of a niche-y cool group that we're starting up this year. So watch out for the Friends of the Survey outreach. There's a few of you that we will be reaching out to directly. But yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is that we're updating questions this year. I mean, Cliff, you're in the middle of that process. What are some of the things right now that you're thinking about that we may add or change in the survey? Anything that the audience should be aware of?
Yeah, one big one, and it actually relates to something that regular listeners or viewers of the show will know very well, in that we're going to be talking about finance. We're going to have a separate section that you can take if it's an area of interest to you to really talk about financial type questions, not the finances of your organization, but if you're a finance professional and how that all ties together. The reason I say that's for regular listeners, you'll know that we see more and more of the integration of those systems and really of those disciplines. It's really the way forward, right? Of something that anyone that's been in HR for a long time knows that that's what we've been working towards as a group, as a profession, which is becoming more intrinsically linked to how businesses succeed. And it's something we've always had in our paper anyway, right? It's that performance aspect of business performance. So why not start really getting into those questions? You'll see a lot of that. There'll also be just really that why question kind of comes up because we were just talking about what is driving impact. Why are not just you buying these systems, but why are you keeping them up? What is the value you're seeing in these systems? And so there'll be a lot more questions digging into that of how is this impacting your employee retention or customer retention? Is this what is of value to this particular tool? So really looking into that further solidification of the world between HR and just business performance.
Yeah, the performance side is something I think you and I have been talking about for a while, which is like outcomes is a conversation. We do a lot with outcomes because we do kind of like general metrics that we track in the paper or in the research. But knowing by application area kind of what kind of outcomes is really powerful. The other thing I think that you and I both have been talking about, it will depend a little bit on how much Tammy allows us. So and that is not, and that mainly that's one because the tool itself, people know what tool we use, but we won't say it right now. But we tend to put it to its max, the amount of limits of fields that it can use in the analysis tool. And we do like to be able to use our own analysis tool in there so that we can get to the data as quickly as possible. But we are looking at adding some more compliance conversations. You and I have talked about that. We're trying to figure out like what are the compliance questions that are most valuable to you. So if you have some ideas, feel free to DM Cliff or I in LinkedIn. The other thing I think that we've been talking quite a bit about is really understanding a little bit more about what's happening in the space around sort of learning, and there's a lot of changes happening there. So we're probably going to rethink some of our questions in that area to make sure that we're getting the right responses right now in some of those areas. Anything else, Cliff, that we haven't mentioned? I think those are the big ones,
well,
right?
There are certain aspects of our survey that long-time takers of the survey might know that we sort of cycle through. So for instance, we didn't ask about succession management practices and tools last year. We will this year. Along with skills management. So basically anything that we have, we're building upon as we do that because of sometimes the limitations tool, but also to make it easier as possible for you to be able to take the survey. So we are always with our eye towards that. We think that's a big part of why we're able to get more responses and better responses is by streamlining the survey and asking only the most relevant and interesting questions.
Yeah, the ones that are most important to decisions you're making and where some of this market is heading. So, but speaking about where the market's heading, Cliff, we have some big news outside. I mean, our survey, we think our survey is the biggest news, but that's because we play with it all day long. There are other things going on. We are seeing some acquisitions. You want to?
Let's talk about that because we were just mentioning skills. Yeah. Lots of people are interested in skills. One of those people being, or at least companies, being Phenom, who have acquired. Now, this is a tricky one because of the name of the organization. The name of the company, before we get to the who's on first situation here, is Phenom has acquired an organization with the name of Be Applied. The company named, quote, Be Applied, end quote, is an AI-first assessment solution that looks at candidate and employee skills, right? So Phenom has been looking further and further into really building out their skills platform and really working with that. So there's a lot here on cognitive assessment and really helping push out more of this AI agentic model for Phenom to do more skills-based hiring and skills-based, not just assessments of individuals, but assessments of the organization, the amount of skills that you have, what you'll need in the future, all of that. It's pretty interesting, Stacey. Sometimes I think you're too far ahead of the conversation. We often, if you've never seen Stacey live, she'll come out and has this sort of, fortune teller thing because she's often at, you were talking about this idea of sort of developing around skills and having an entire skills-based organization, I think 5 years ago. And now people are starting to go, yeah, we're ready for that now.
Yeah. So it's about where it's at. And part of the reason I had something like kind of where skills could go is that's where I started my career. I was my first sort of management job was a competency manager, right? At a little bank called Key Bank back in the day, right? And, that was all done by hand and all done with binders and binders of items and a lot of job analysis. The tech has given us so much more here that we can do with this. What I really like about this, and I want to say, I wasn't laughing at the company. I was laughing at the name just because we had someone, I think it was it the other acquisition that Phenom made too, right? It was something like that was right in line with what we were talking about, right? So it was one of those things where we didn't know if we were saying the name or if we were describing the company. The Be Applied, I mean, I do think that, one, this is not a company we had previewed previously. And a lot of times these companies are really small when they get brought into these organizations. But I'm a big believer in cognitive and assessments, especially when they are done very well, because I do think that there is a lot of times that, and assessments don't mean to do this. And there's a lot of work trying to make sure that they don't. But sometimes it's just really hard to build it out, which is that we make judgment calls based off of not always intelligence, but based off of, what a person knows about the world we live in, right? Like, that's why sometimes you'll pick a lot of people who go to the same college and university you do, or who came from the same background you did. Like, boy, if we all worked at Deloitte before, we all kind of have the same framework for how we do work, right? And you miss some really amazing people who maybe don't understand what the word framework, entails in your context, but could run circles around you in the sense of what should be in that framework, right? Because they're just really good. And so cognitive assessments are really great ways of sort of getting at some of those sort of diamonds in the rough, right? And I wouldn't even call them diamond in the rough, just different workforce backgrounds. What I really think is interesting here, though, is that Phenom has been for quite some time kind of the talent, like they've been kind of straddling talent intelligence, analytics, sort of not quite ATS, right? Like everything but the ATS in the candidate space, right? And this, I think, solidly sort of puts them much more on what we would have considered sort of that candidate talent intelligence kind of space that we've been looking at, right? Everyone is kind of looking at how do I get the data to understand the skills conversation. I think assessments are a lot safer way to get it than what we've been seeing with content scraping and scraping from the market, right? So this is, I think a good move for Phenom. I'd like to see where it's going. They have other assessment tools I think they had purchased in the past. I think this sort of matches nicely with where they're at. Phenom, I think, is one we just have to shout out to them that when I look at a lot of this industry, there's a lot of these guys who do really well. They kind of grow, they get acquired, they get changed. Phenom's always been very good at very clear about what they are and what they're creating and what they're building. And it's been nice to kind of see them take step-by-step growth. Customers are generally very, very happy with them. We don't see a ton in our research. Hopefully we can get some more this year. But when they do use Phenom, they're very happy with them. And I think it's because they're very consistent about what they're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Another story that's sort of following up on that is one we talked about last year and sort of a follow-up to that, which is that Thoma Bravo has completed their acquisition of Dayforce. We had mentioned it before. We were always very careful with our language to say this was an announcement with intent to acquire, assuming everything goes through. Well, everything has gone through legally, I guess, is what you would think of. So, the shareholder approval and cleared all the regulatory hurdles. So the final cost, $12.3 billion. I think we had discussed what it would be around. Obviously showing value for something like that. I think individual stockholders ended at 70 before it gets delisted. So pretty interesting stuff, and definitely another organization that we've seen perform. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they had a pretty good performance last year in our survey as well. Dayforce
They did really well in our survey last year. Now, I think some of that came out of it. We know this happens. I mean, this is part of in the industry. This isn't like secret or anything, right? Like if I'm getting ready to, it's like getting ready to sell a house, I'm getting ready to sell something. I'm going to fix all the little things that I need to fix. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think they were addressing was some of the customer service and care issues that they had. You could see that in the data. It is interesting to see how our data flips pretty quickly, right? Like particularly on vendor satisfaction. UX doesn't change a whole lot sometimes, but vendor satisfaction generally almost always can change rapidly just based off of where you're at from one year to the next. And so they definitely did go through and fix all that. What I think it's interesting to know too for people that if you don't kind of follow this kind of stuff, for the buyers, the value proposition, understanding that this has gone through and this now is that one is that you will see now an infusion of money in certain areas from Thoma Bravo, but you also might see some changes in leadership. So that's something to keep an eye on, right? Because a lot of times once those acquisitions are done, they're going to come in and say, now I want my leadership in here doing things. And so that sometimes changes. I don't know if that's the case. David Ossip is pretty, proud of what he's got there at Dayforce. We haven't heard any inklings on that conversation, right? The other thing that is important for us on the analyst side is that while these organizations are in these kind of acquisition modes, they oftentimes have to go quiet. Like they can't say anything because they don't want anything to mess up that acquisition buy. There's a lot of the public number needs to stay the same. So we end up not hearing a lot of data. And so we're actually glad when these things go through because now we can start talking to those organizations again. They can start sharing us what their plans are, what their roadmaps are. Sometimes they can't even do that when they're in the middle of these processes. So it's always good when they finally kind of come through.
Absolutely. And I should point out, too, that Thoma Bravo owns a few different HCM companies. So this is not something where this is sort of outside money coming in to do a quick flip. They tend to take a longer term approach to the organizations that they have under their umbrella. Now, speaking of new companies, that was a well-established Pantomath. This is one that is being backed also by VC, by Snowflake Ventures. And what's pretty interesting here is because Pantomath does this first time I've heard this term, which is bring your own lineage model, right? So the data lineage product, which is more or less what Pantomath is doing. It is a data operations center, but a lot of what it's able to do is basically track lineage from all of your different systems, right? Generally, each system has its own method of tracking data lineage. Now, if you don't know what data lineage is, join the club. But dude, this is the world of HR nowadays, right? You probably didn't have to know what data governance was up until about 15 years ago. Now we're all experts. So data lineage is more or less what it sounds like, right? It's basically where was data created? What is the origin of that data? What system did it appear in? Sort of why? Has it changed at all? And where has it moved? Think about it like this. If you've entered an employee record in, right? You need to know where was that employee record created? Was that through our talent acquisition system? Is that how it entered into our HCM? You need to know how it's changed because that could have regulatory reasons. It could have, just being able to serve your own employees reasons, right? You need to track when certain things happen because that could matter for benefits, for instance, and, where it's moved to. So basically think of it as more or less a real-time audit trail rather than looking back. That's a data lineage product. It's not the only thing it does. There's a lot in there about data reliability, anomaly detection and that type of thing. But what's interesting to me is that this is very much an HR discussion now and not just a database manager discussion.
Yeah, and part of the reason I came across this, and I just wanted to highlight it because I think, one, the money and the investments, the changes that are happening here, but the CEO and chairman, I'm going to say Shashank's name incorrectly. I think it's Saxana, but my friends would probably give me a better approach to saying it. But I know him and from the work that he had done, because he actually founded or was part of the founding group of Vinly, which is the contingent workforce management solution that Workday picked up several years ago. And I mean, his approach in thinking about data, even at that point in time, was way out in front of where the market was at. It was one of the reasons why that solution was acquired by Workday, was because he had really thought through this value prop of data and how it needed to be integrated in a way that vendor management systems had not done previously, right? And I think I would watch this. I know a couple of other people who have bought into this, I think, but I think this area in general, I'm seeing more and more conversations about the fact that the reason AI doesn't work effectively is because of unclean data, of really bad data sets, right? And so, and this is a problem, whether it's AI or not, whether it's your current tech systems, any systems, right? So the idea of understanding the lineage of your data, where it came from, where it's been through, how it got changed, that kind of thing, and being able to map that and get a visual of it and understand it. We've talked about that for a long time, but I couldn't tell you how to do it. I don't know, Cliff, if you could tell people, like it's a process of of Excel spreadsheets and IT technology from like ServiceNow and others, and solutions that you kind of put on top of other solutions. So to have a system that says it can do this, I'm interested. We've reached out. I'm going to try and get a briefing with him. But I just thought it was, if you're starting to think about where this market is heading, I think you have to be understanding that not only you're seeing people like Shashank go to something like this, right? We saw Workday just picked up a huge API integration platform with the MCP use conversation, right? We just saw another organization pick up another integration platform.
Azure did as well, also picked up some MC.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the space that they're trying to fix to get to the next level. And so anybody from a big corporate level has to be working through that conversation right now too. So, anyways, sorry, long way to talk about it. I think it's just where it's an exciting space for me because we've been talking data for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's very much within the remit of spilling the tea, right? If you want to know what's going on first, that's going to be one of them. If you thought bring your own AI was prescient for Stacey to point out, that'll be another one where you're like, bring your own lineage. I heard it here first.
Bring your own data lineage. Man, is that going to be...
that does not roll off the tongue as well.
Yeah, it does not roll off the tongue. Yeah. BYO, bring your own AI did a little bit more.
So we were just talking about skills. So Skillsoft, Precipio is now in general availability. They also went through a rebrand because they are putting skills in the forefront. Now, I know it's always been in their name, and it's, they point out in their press release that it's always been part of their brand. But they're really taking it front and center that learning and skills are together. They're not separate activities. So that is part of what the Precipio brand is. Now, we're saying it's in general availability, meaning it's available to everyone. It's been out long enough that we were seeing it in our survey of people writing in that that's what they used, to the point that they didn't realize it was a Skillsoft product. So that is just been a movement. You'll probably notice if you're someone who tracks these sort of things, the logo looks a little different for Skillsoft, and that will be a lot more of the language moving forward.
Yeah,
so, that skills thing.
Rebranding is always a conversation you and I are like, is that an announcement? Is that still right? What I do think is interesting is that we are seeing organizations like Skillsoft. I would also include someone like a Korn Ferry in here, right? Literally owned the competency model skills conversation in the early sort of 2000s, mid 2000s, right? And particularly in some sense allowed it to sort of move out as the tech market changed around them, where they kept the sort of the content behind it, right? I've seen Korn Ferry do some really amazing and exciting things. Skillsoft used to be the tech, like it had content that was in every company, and that sort of had changed a bit for them, right? Like now they're having to rebuild and gain that audience again. This is a real case where you do have to watch how tech is impacting IP, right? Like those two things have to go hand in hand. And this is, we face this every day on the research side. Are we a tech company? Are we a data company, right? And some cases you can be both. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you have to just figure out how you work on partnership models. But that's a thing. We're seeing compliance companies have this conversation. We're seeing learning content companies in general having this conversation. Anybody who has data has to ask that question, where's the tech play in this role? And that was one of them. I think skills is a big part of that conversation because it changed the dynamic of what a skills was, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Then we get PayScale. They have introduced a new international database. This is in sort of conversation. And the reasoning for this is a lot about the EU Pay Transparency Directive, and they want to make sure that they can meet their customer needs. But it's also been something they've been looking to do for a long time. So Pulse Plus will be the PayScale new offering. That's what the plus sign if you're searching for it online. And that combines all of the PayScale offering with external market information so that they can address international data sets and international needs. Definitely one that, if we were talking about one of the sort of topics for 2026 going into it, I would say that early on, and this is interesting, right? Because we started noticing trends early in 2025 that sort of played out throughout the year, definitely this movement and interest in skills and the application of skills, not just the inventory, but actually how are they using it to drive business performance, and more of an international movement. We're talking internationally, the United States, I should mention. If you can't tell from an accent, we're an American company, and we're starting to see more American companies shift internationally, both because it's a natural state of growth and also because of just general economic features that's going on. It's the locus of power, of economic power shifts out of the U.S. I think we'll see more and more of this.
Yeah. And if you're trying to follow what's happening with that EU transparency, pay transparency conversation, and I think that's going to continue to be a really big opportunity for a lot of organizations to rethink their models, because it is a great way to sort of, regulations don't always help us do the best way of things, but at least gets us. Anita Letnick, who's a good friend of ours, has been doing a lot of work in this space. She actually, I just followed a couple things she had posted on the other day. You know, Ireland's come up with sort of like, oh, we're going to wait a little bit more and give some space here. There's like every country's kind of doing a little bit different in this space, but I do know that it's driving a lot of tech vendor decisions. And so the conversation has been like, use your tech, make sure you're using it appropriately. It is nice to see that PayScale sort of is moving in this direction to get more data, because I think that's going to be the real conversation after I make it apparent to what is my pay models inside my company, and I work with everyone on making sure that it is clear and communicating that. Then the next question is, well, what is a valid number inside this market? And that's a hard conversation. No AI can tell you, because it is a very much pressure tested by what the market will bear. And that changes pretty dramatically based off of the level of availability of the skill sets, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. It is coming back to skills, right?
Yeah.
It's availability of those skills, and how do you value those things? And yeah, the availability of those would change internationally. It's not just a currency transfer, right? So that's a very good point. Speaking of skills, we don't plan these things. This is just what the news is. But pretty interesting. Workday has the military skills mapper. So basically helping to find and make better use of veteran talent. Of course, there are organizations like Hire Hero and stuff that are out there, but this would be designed specifically within Workday to get more of the skills that veterans come into without having to sort of go through specialized job boards that you sometimes see, right? But instead be able to get to the over 200,000 U.S.-based service members that transition to civilian life every year. How do we help them reach the regular workforce? And there's a number, I should say, of underserved groups, people with disabilities, former incarcerated, and veterans. So I love anytime there's a story like one of these.
Yeah, this one's close and near and dear to my heart. My husband was in the service. My dad is a veteran. My son is in the service. And so we have a huge amount of our family that this, it is a tough place, right? And a lot of the challenges for veterans when they come out of the work environment is that, their environments are very different from what we're getting at, the corporate level, and there's no great way to make that connection, right? But they have an amazing amount of skills when they come out in a lot of different places, which just don't translate on a resume, right? Which is all these tools using resumes. So I love the ability to sort of connect those dots for them, right?
Yeah, you think about work ethic, you think about organizational skills, you think about understanding sort of organizational, chains of command, things like that. Yeah. That's intrinsic to anyone that's spent any significant amount of time in the military.
Good leadership in general, yeah.
Yeah, good point, yeah. Let's see, we've got a little story here. It looks like Workday CEO stepped down. We'll move past that. That's not interesting. Just kidding. That's the major story.
So we're going to go into that one?
We're having fun here. So Workday CEO Carl Eschenbach stepping down. Aneel Bhusri to take over. We're going to go into some detail here because you may have already heard this story. Certainly by the time this episode drops, you may or may not know that Stacey is probably one of the Workday whisperers. She's one of the people that knows this organization.
I've just been around a long time. I think I've been at their innovation.
That is not what I was going to say.
I'm not the longest. There are several who have been there longer than me, but at least for 10 years now, I think we said 12 years, right?
Yeah, and you know all these people personally, sort of the ins and outs. So if there was ever going to be some time to gather around the tea room and listen to Aunt Stacey tell us what's going on here, Stacey. Tell us what's happening here.
Yeah, no, I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. When the news dropped, a lot of times like analysts get pre-reads into some of this stuff, right? Like we knew there were some changes because there at the same time that this is taking place, there were a couple, but I think 400 employees. I'm not sure if that's the exact number or not, but of layoffs at Workday. So we knew there were some of those changes taking place after. Again, they're a public company. There's only so much they can share publicly. They can't let out too much too early. So a lot of times it's under embargo what we're shared, and some of it's just because things are changing and they've got to sort of make some decisions. In this particular case, we didn't get any sort of heads up on it, and so and then we had clients who called us and said, "Hey, how is this change going to impact us?" And my take on this is that, people who founder-led models, you and I have talked about this, Cliff, that founders in general just have a passion that's hard to replace, no matter who. Now, I've seen some companies do some really good transitions, and Aneel had been working towards sort of sharing sort of leadership for many, many years in the process. And Carl, when he brought in Carl, had a very specific set of things that he needed him to get done. One is optimize the environment. There was a lot of, as you grow, whenever you grow a big company like that, there's a lot of just inefficiencies that get built into the fact that we've just grown fast, and Workday grew really fast. And so I think there was optimizing the environment. That's a really hard thing to do. It's a hard thing for a founder to do because you got to let go of things that oftentimes are very dear to you. He also really needed Carl to focus on sort of growth globally and to think about the partnership models. And those were kind of the three things I heard over and over again. And Carl had a lot of connections and a lot of work in that space. And I think that was really, really his focus over the last couple of years. And he did a phenomenal job on that. I think from a partnership perspective, we haven't seen a company scale their partnership model quite that large in a number of years, and they did a great job at that. Part of the reason I think the board sort of made probably this decision at this point in time is it wasn't Workday alone. Every tech company had seen pretty big drops in their stock prices over the last couple of months. That was a reality. The other thing is that we know that as you're running through a major industry change, it's hard to run a major industry change with a focus on optimization because you have to make some big swings, big technical swings, big cultural changes, big changes. When you're following, founders just have a little bit more chutzpah in that conversation, right? Like they're able to say, look, we are making this change. It's going to hurt. Here's why. People are a little bit more willing sometimes to follow a founder down that painful path than they will for someone maybe who just stepped into the new role. So my sense is that this was a little bit of that AI is such a big change. Last year's Innovation Summit, Aneel was still there talking to us about the AI vision. So he has not really stepped out of that AI leadership role at all, even in his new role in chairman and the board. So I don't think he's been very far away from this. He's been very hands-on in all of this. And, even at that point in time, we had a conversation. He was very intrigued by our data on mid-market growth and where that market was heading. And you've seen that roll out, like his vision in there rolled into some of their Workday Go and the focus on going down market, right? So he was even then still looking at the data, still looking at the information. So I don't think he went too far. There's always a goal to try and get some more balance in your family life. And I think there was a bit of that trying to happen too. But I do think in this moment in time, we are going to see more of this, I think, happen in other leadership roles is I have to rethink, do I have the right people leading the ship when the whole market is changing around AI? Now, you and I have differing opinions on how much that change will stay versus how much it might be a bubble. But even if it's a bubble, you don't want your company going through it and not handling it appropriately, right? And so I think that's a big part of this. So I think customers are going to be really happy to see Aneel back, that he has always been very customer centric. Carl was as well, but I think Carl had a broader view of what that looked like. So Aneel would get down and he's going to shake the hands with the CHROs and the chief financial officers and that kind of thing. And I think the partners are probably going to want to understand how this adjusts the partner strategy. So I'm expecting them to come out with some conversations about that. And as they think, I don't think it should change it, but I do think it should. They're going to have some conversations about how much does that change maybe our approach to partnership conversations, right? I don't know if it's going to change the technical direction of them or not. That's the thing I'm going to be watching for is will Aneel come in and shift any of the technology? Because they've made some big technology decisions in the last couple of months. Lots of acquisitions, lots of decisions about tech and tech tools that they're bringing into the environment. I don't know where Aneel stands on those. I think we're all going to watch to see if he'll change any of that in his role. It might be that it's business as usual, and he's really just coming in to basically reconnect the dots for everyone. But we'll see. So,
And Carl will stay on as a special advisor
yeah.
role, so not sort of down and out or anything like that. You mentioned the job cuts. Workday around the same time announced they'd be cutting 2% of their workforce, so around 400 people approximately. That will all be completed by April, most likely. So this is sort of an all-in-one, right? It sounds like they're sort of battening down the hatches for our sailors out there.
Yeah.
As you said, that's often the case when you get one of the founders in, which Aneel was, along with Dave Duffield.
Yeah, and we should know at least I think in general, if you can kind of read between the lines of that announcement about the job cuts, is that they did some customer care, right, non-revenue generating roles.
Right.
But what we do expect is that I expect to see some of those probably pick back up again in other regions. That would be my bet. Like they were, I think as they see growth in other regions, they have to scale those regions. That's going to take some finances to scale those regions. They're going to have to reset some roles. I mean, that's always a balance that organizations have to make. And so my bet would be that some of that's going to be a little bit, we're going to see some of the shifts in the roles and where they're at, right?
Yeah, that's something that we saw in the question we had in our survey about your priorities for 2026 and beyond. A lot of it went from sort of long-term growth to a lot of things just efficiency, right?
Yeah.
So getting it into what is sort of key to get us through these times. Yeah. Again, not specific to Workday at all. So there was also just some sort of general news, and this is kind of relates to that, really, right? It's something else that we start to see that's more of, I think, of a broader economic shift. This came from Perceptix. If you don't know Perceptix, even though I think we brought them up on the show before, they're an employee listening, survey, engagement platform, employee experience. I'm sure that seems to be a popular term. But so they asked, what do you value at work? And so they found that employees prioritized organizational stability over feeling valued at work. Now, if you're kind of new at HR, probably for over a decade, it's been, well, that's what employees want most, to feel valued at work, to feel like they have an impact, to feel, that their work has meaning, and there's another way that's often phrased. But now it's like, no, I just want the company to be there, right? Which is fine. And I do want to point out, those have always been one and two. It's one or the other, right? I want my organization to exist, and I want to feel that I'm a good part of that, right? So
I think this is the first time in 10 years it's been number one. Is that kind of the shift? Is that what they
oh my
were
goodness,
saying?
First time in since 2016 that we've seen that the one and two switch back. I honestly thought it'd be earlier. I would thought it'd been like 16 years. But another one that is pretty interesting that would be of value to a lot of the listeners, I know they're interested in change management, is that the question, is change handled effectively at my company? Is now the top driver for employee engagement, right? So not just, why do you stay at your company, but like what makes you feel engaged and that you can handle change, right? That's a stability sort of question, right?
Well, what I really liked here, and so they noted that feelings of belonging and feeling valued were the number one top consistent, right, from engagement drivers from 2016 through 2024, and those fell to the bottom position, 4 and 5, which I think it's not even just who went to the top; it's like who fell to the bottom. And the actual note was, this marks the most dramatic shift in top engagement drivers since they began its benchmark database 20 years ago. So again, these are companies that assess engagement, right? Like, so this is kind of their thing. So we get that this is sort of your own internal data, but it is.
Hi, I'm Carmen Hudson. I'm the host of the Recruiting Book Club, and we're starting our second season. I'm so excited to bring to you another set of guests of recruiters who have written books. We are excited to have some very special guests this season. We've got Shally, we've got Craig Fisher, James Ellis, and quite a few other people that we're going to bring on board to tell us about what they wrote, why they wrote it, and maybe we'll veer off into a conversation about recruiting on all types of topics and subjects that happen in our industry. So I hope you can join us. I'm excited.
It is noteworthy that we are seeing employees. It would be interesting to know for someone maybe who's tracking this since like 2010, is this what we would have seen in 2010, right? At 2008, right? Is it because the economy, because of the layoffs, or is this because of the political environment or the social environment? Like, what is driving that is going to be, I think, a conversation we're going to see in the next couple of months kind of play out, right?
Yeah. There's also some interesting language in here that reflects something that we start to really we've been thinking about for a little bit, which is this idea of trust. They're tracking not just engagement, but trust. So, if you believe that your work contributes to organizational progress, you also score higher in their trust metric. And that's something that we find of a lot of value too, right? It's not just like, are you productive, right? Do you feel engaged at work? But like, do you trust the workplace? Because that has a much more deeper impact in, things like retention and the type of work that you do and all that type of thing. And those type of metrics, you had noted, Stacey, there aren't enough executives seeing those metrics. They're not looking at trust. They've been sort of trained we've taught them engagement stuff. But as an HR professional, start thinking about that.
We track, I think, 16 metrics in our assessment. We ask which ones get shown to executives on a regular basis, and trust is like one of the lowest. It's always like 2%, 5% compared to like engagement and turnover to 60%, right? Like, so it's, it's just a sad state. I think we underestimate the value of trust, right? And to some extent, I don't know if leaders care, which is why they probably don't. But we know that from the data and from external data sets too, that trust has a huge impact on whether I spend my extra time with you or not, right?
Right. And what is stability if not trust, right? Believing that you can sort of understand what's going to happen next is stability, right? And that's trust. So just something to think about, something that we'll definitely be coming back to. Something else that's very interesting, speaking of our business, Stacey, is one put out by Wells Fargo, annual report that they do on small businesses, but it's the impact of women-owned business. And I want to give a special shout out to Jerry Stengel, who did a lot of the analysis that we're going to be going through. It's a long report, and there's a lot of very interesting reports, but I always kind of take a look at these and glance at them, and sometimes I'll disagree with whoever kind of brought this to my attention. I'll do my own analysis, but I really liked what Jerry had here, and I really found a lot of it pretty interesting. One is that although there's a lot of women-owned business, a lot being, I'm putting air quotes for anyone that's not watching this, because it should be reflective of the population. It's not. It's 40% of U.S. businesses. But she makes a great point. Only 9% of those are employer firms, meaning they employ another person, right? You're not just a self-employed. It's just my business, right? So to be an actual business that employs other people, it's only 9% of women-owned businesses, right? And that's the largest bit of revenue generation, right? More than 80% of all the revenue that's generated from women-owned businesses comes from those employer firms. Meaning, what's basically happening here is that we've got a lot of women in business, it seems like at first glance in the data, but what we're not seeing is the sort of resources needed for growth, for stability, for growth, for, really the expansion of that, which means better access to capital, right? You need better incentives, I think a better understanding away from that. So we're not really giving them the opportunity to scale that's really happening that you would see from other sort of businesses. There's something holding them back. Because basically, if you add up all the employees that are at these women-owned businesses, it still only represents 9% of the total U.S. employment, right? So there's a big discrepancy here on what looks like at first glance is a decent amount of women-owned businesses and the actual impact it's having on the economy. And we've got to start bridging that gap.
Yeah, this one's a very personal conversation for me, obviously, right? I got to meet Jerry Stengel at the WeBank event, which is Women Business Entrepreneurs organization, which we're part of and certified women owned in our organization. And it was fascinating to find another sort of kindred soul. And she was in a room that literally, like, they should have made it 3 times bigger. She was in a room and the people were flowing out the door trying to see what she was saying, right? Like I was in there. I'm like, oh, who? I want to see. Let me in, right? And she's up on the stage, and Wells Fargo supports this, but it used to be Bank of America. There's a couple others. Like, this has been, so yes, it's supported by the banks, and the banks are always trying to say, like, we should do more and all those kind of things. We want people to come to us to use our services. But what I loved about Jerry, she goes, she was out there saying, look, hey, women, there's some things you need to be doing here to fixing here to this, right? Like she told the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we always say, right, of what she saw in the research. She didn't go in thinking, oh, this is, women aren't being treated fairly. She went in with, what is the outcomes we're trying to achieve? What are the things that we're seeing year over year? She's done this for multiple years. Just I want to say this is 15, 20 years. It's been many, many years that she's run it. So when I got a chance to talk to her, I was like, oh, she gets this idea that, if you go in and you don't focus on women or men or different, nationalities or races or anything, but you just look at the data first. Then you let the data tell you what's really happening, because that's what we do a lot of, right? Which is that, that really gives you a better sense of what's happening in the market. And it also gives you a better sense of what you can change, right? And how you can make a difference. And so she does a really good job. She does break this down also by some other demographics, which I really love. I would look at her site and the things that she does in it. Just a really good example of what this looks like in real life. We are a women-owned business. I became a full partner with Susan and Terry in 2020. Owning a company for the first time was eye-opening for me, because I had heard all the stories, and we had gone, I don't know, about 2 years in, we had wanted to get some funding. Just I think it was just an extra line of credit to sort of just have as accessible for the business, to make sure that in case anything happened, we could have extra line of money. And I remember we were talking to the guy who was our banker at the time, and there was this like, well, if you didn't make this much this year, and if you made less the next year, and there was this whole thing like, you shouldn't use your line of credit because they might not give it to you the next year conversation. And we were like, oh wow, okay. And then we kind of went back and all set back, and then we went out and talked to a couple of other guys who'd been through other business, and they're like, yeah, no, that's the whole point of a line of credit, right? And it was one of those moments where we were like, yeah, no, we're business women. We've all been doing this for many years, and even we got that like, hey, we just don't, know that line of credit made a difference. Both for us, we were able to make some investments that we needed. And then the next year, things went very well. It was important for us to do. I think those are the kind of things we don't understand, that just that little bit of, maybe you shouldn't do what you're saying, or maybe you should be more conservative. Men generally don't get that kind of conversation from their bankers, right? And that may be good or bad. I don't know. There's an opportunity there to discuss, should people be more conservative in general in the business model? But if you don't have money to invest, you don't grow a business. That's just a reality check for the most part, right? Like, bootstrapping is a great conversation, but at certain points, you need infusions of cash to get things moving. We might need to hire someone. We might need to get to the next level. So this is a real issue. I know I didn't realize until we were probably in about 2 years, and I realized, us having, now we're up to, I think, 9 employees, having 9 employees, we were one of a very small percentage of women-owned businesses that had that number of employees in the market, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess there's another male now, but I will say, just as an aside, work for a women-owned business. It's way better.
Yeah.
That's my plug. Every little bit helps. So
I'll take that clip. Kind of everybody in the ground going, oh, okay.
It's really great. But all right, so this has been pretty impressive. We've mentioned AI a little bit, but this is pretty interesting. We'll tie into this. This was Steve Smith's post they put onto LinkedIn. And there was some pretty interesting stuff about G2 that we'll get to. I did want to throw out one stat that he brought up from some Gallup research showing that 46% of employees use it at least occasionally, almost exactly what our numbers have shown for the last 2 years. And the daily AI users is only about 12% of the workforce, with leaders using a lot more. Now, remember last episode, we talked about some research that Dayforce had done that we also seen, which is that it is more of a management tool. It's more popular among executives and buyers, and that sometimes can account for why there's sometimes a mismatch between perception of the usage, right? Because if you're using it all the time, you must think everyone's using it all the time. This is true of any tool, right? And why there's sometimes a mismatch and why there's a little bit of conflict. One thing that I always like to tell people is that when it comes to AI, because I think there is a little bit of, putting aside, even though I don't really like to, putting aside all the environmental impact and where the power is coming from and all that. One interesting thought experiment that I've started that someone else brought into me, probably at Zitron or something, is use AI for a task you don't need it for. Something you're the expert on that you would like, no, I can just do this fast. Use AI and see what you think. Because it's a lot easier to kind of say, wow, this is really useful when it's something you don't know anything about, right? Because you're like, wow, this is really crazy, right? And you might start to realize like, maybe this isn't as valuable, or you might find it is, in which case you're going to start to really understand the value too. Now, Stacey and I, a little behind the scenes, like we often talk about this because there's applications for this in our work. And also we are strong believers, both of us, despite my sort of pessimistic sort of sounding there, that we should understand these tools if we're going to be talking about them in this setting and in our survey and things like that. We need to test them. We need to, if we were talking about cars, we'd be test driving the cars. It's no different. And so we often talk about the limitations, but also we do like to talk about where there is value found in that. And what it comes back to, and I'm probably taking the words out of your mouth here, Stacey, is what is the impact this is having on business outcomes, right? What does it really matter? It's one of the things that, Stacey, I think you started doing 2 years ago, which is let's take a look at those organizations that are in this daily use category and how do they compare in terms of their business outcomes, not just best practices, but proven practices.
And it wasn't a huge amount. It was like 5 or 8%. It wasn't
but
like
it was
the kind
positive.
Of impact it was positive, but it wasn't the kind of impact you get from doing good change management, which is some kind of 12 and 15%, right? But now we're on opposite sides of this cliff, right? It's too funny. But yeah, I'm one of those managers. I'm like, let's use more. I keep sending my team like, here's what we're doing, and they're all like, hold on, hold your horses. We're gonna make sure the data's the data and the security of that data is so important to us, right? But it is, I think, as a manager, I can see why the executives get excited. As an employee, and having been an employee for a very long time back in the day, I can also see why I'm like, you haven't made this easy for me yet, right? Inside the company. So it can help me make my travel plans, all the cool things I want to do for my personal self, but inside the company, you haven't made it easy for me yet. And I think that's going to be the conversation, right? That the outcomes aren't there, right?
Yeah. And then speaking of our survey, pretty interesting one that relates to the world of sort of HR data, HR business intelligence, whatever you want to call it, just business intelligence in general. Also, Steve Smith sort of alerted us to this, which is G2 has gone through a sort of string of acquisitions that are basically on.
We should let people know what G2 is.
Yeah, good point.
It's a software selection sort of a guidance site, right?
Yeah, I want to say it's not quite consumer reports for HR software or software.
It's all other tech. It's not just.
Think about it. Yeah, think about it like that. I guess briefly, basically, like here's a list of if you're like, hey, I need to know who are the competitors to Workday, right? You would go G2 be one of those sites. Now, one of the other sites you'd probably go to is Capterra, but now G2 has acquired them, along with Software Advice, which you can tell from the name what they do, and GetApp, which previously was owned by Gartner. So. That is pretty interesting. So what's happening here is we're getting to see a sort of a monopoly in the sort of business intelligence ratings of software sites, concerns, whatever you want to call them. And why does that matter? It's somewhat the world we're in, right? If you're listening to this, you are interested in what is going on with software, probably a little more specifically HR tech and work tech. But having all of those under one sort of roof, right? Raise some questions, right? Like any monopoly would. And it's pretty interesting. Just something to be aware of. It certainly raised an eyebrow for us. Maybe it's a little inside baseball, but I do think it's worth noting that when you're trying to get information on organizations, I would never say, even for our own company, I would never say just go to us. I'd say go to a lot of organizations. And it's worth noting sometimes that if you're getting 3 different ratings, you may not be.
It reminds me of the days when Airbnb bought VRBO, right? And we were like, oh, you're getting 2 different prices, and you're getting and basically no.
Wait, Airbnb and Vrbo I'm in the HR tech world too much.
Right, sorry, they're owned by the same company. But is that same, like if you're going to all 3 of those sites, because I always say three sources. And they are owned all by this, and you're like, so how does that data working? And I don't know. We haven't talked to any of these companies. We don't know how they're managing this right separately. I think Steve Smith. Part of the reason it caught my eyes, Steve Smith did a very. G2 says, F it, and we're going to go monopoly. That was his call out for it. And I was like, all right, I need it. We probably should maybe just have some fun with this one, because we did kind of think, is this really appropriate for us to talk about? Because not that we're in a different space to some extent. We're not selling people like, oh, you went and clicked on this and now your name is going to go off to the vendor. Mm-hmm. That's not the work that we do, but we do user experience and voice the customer data sets, right? It's a weird world. And I do think that, perception is everything, and not knowing who's behind the data. It's a conversation everyone should be having, not whether it's them or anybody else, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, sort of on the AI one, this was a pretty interesting one from Armin Berkeley, who we've brought up on the show before as well. an interesting LinkedIn post about AI's impact in education. So basically, they gave students in two different groups access to ChatGPT, the 4 model specifically, whether they got just tutoring with AI, right, or just no AI at all. And the AI group went up 48% if they could just use the tool. If they got AI-based tutoring, it went up 127%, based on scores on standardized tests or tests that they had created for this study. Then they removed the AI and retested, and those that had used the ChatGPT model did worse than they had before. Meaning if you had used nothing, you would have, had a slight increase or gone flat. But those that use ChatGPT, although they had that slight increase, they didn't revert back to zero. They actually did worse. I think the good analogy here, and this probably is not going to sound anti-AI when I use this analogy, is the advent of GPS. I think, Stacey, you've mentioned this before, right? Any of us that are of a certain age used maps to get around. GPS came around and most people couldn't read a map now. But that's fine because GPS is still here, right? So, this is only of worry if you are, if you are kind of structuring your organization, you're like, are you counting on AI to always be there? A Gen AI specifically, or at least AI as we kind of think about it in a natural sense. I think, GPS is not quite a perfect analogy because the amount of data and power needed to run GPS is nowhere nearby, right? So, just meaning that the infrastructure needed for it doesn't have the same concerns AI does. If AI were more or less free, then we just say, who cares? Fine, then just keep using it, just like you would a calculator. But knowing that it requires such massive data centers, power, water, all of those other things, and immense amounts of capital, it's not realistic to think that it's going to continue its growth right now. So it's worth noting that it may be illusory, some of these performance increases.
Yeah, it's, I think you and I, this is where probably you and I probably differ the most as the GPS example is like, I couldn't tell you how to get outside of the first 5 streets in my
I've been to your house. I couldn't do it without a GPS and guidance. It's the most complicated.
Because we got a lot of trees in our area, right? And I've never been great at directions. People who know me know that, right? But it is and I would have troubles. I would, if I didn't have my GPS. And there are times when I lose a GPS and it causes me issues. So I do know that there is places where you kind of need that. But if I'm a business owner in reality, and I see that 48% performance uptick, that's massive, right? And the one with tutoring, which was 127% uptick, like that's, and those, I think those kids they didn't drop below, but they didn't get any better than the kids who didn't have tutoring, right? So they were the same level when they went and took the STs afterwards, if they didn't have the tutoring available, right? So it helped them learn, but it didn't help them get any better afterwards. I guess my perspective on this is that, human beings and businesses in general will go towards the easiest path, and the easiest path is always the one that's going to get you more performance, right? Now, whether or not we are going to pay, whether or not the cost of that will play a role in that, I think depends on how you see that cost and how it gets portrayed. And I think that's the piece that we don't know what's going to happen right now. Right now, in North Carolina here alone, right, like data centers are being put in place and our electric bill's going up. So unless I know that the AI that I'm buying is bringing my electric, like those two things don't always seem connected, right? Mm-hmm. So I think unless someone says the AI is going to cost me more, I may not realize the cost I'm paying for it, right? So those are, human beings are human beings, right?
We're going to stick on this theme a little bit, but we're going to go into the speed round. If you've been listening for a while, we've got the speed round now to save you all. I always try to think of what is the most common commute, around an hour. So here you are. You're pulling into the neighborhood. So here's pretty interesting. Claude, Anthropic, that makes Claude, the AI program, announced Claude for Excel. This could be a very good use case. Anyone that's used Excel would love to be able to just say, hey, can you just take all of this data and give me a summary page or do all these sort of things? Natural language, using both the large language models that we've come to expect to sort of understand us when we're speaking, easier for us than others, and then make a meaningful Excel sheet out of it. And they make a good point that a lot of people are a little hesitant here because most of these are predictive models. So they're not using the same sort of predictive model for this, meaning they're not going, what's most likely the right answer? It's got to be just math, right?
Yeah, this was posted by Max Bloomberg, who, by the way, is one of the people. If you know people analytics, he's been one of the sort of the godfathers of people analytics for a while, right? Like he's been around for a while. And the reason I caught onto it was because some of my good friends like Andrew Merritt and Don Taylor and Daniel Bush, and they all were piling on like, I have use cases. I could do this tomorrow. All of them were excited about it. When you see that group of people say they're excited, I pay attention. You should pay attention. We'll see where this goes. I don't know how good it is, but he felt it was really good. So just as the speed round goes, this one I think is pay attention to it, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's an interesting tech entrepreneur entered the LA mayor's race. The LA mayor's race, just like all California politics, as a former resident there's never just like two people in a race. It's always like 700. So it was interesting because Stacey pointed out something as more of historical note. But anyway, I should mention first of all that Adam Miller is the one that is filed his paperwork to join the LA mayor's race, but you had put up one from a historical one, 2020.
Yeah, so this was 2020. So Bryn Kennedy, who had started Topia, some people might remember it as I want to say Move On or Move Global, something like that. It used to be, but it's a mobility tool for international and global sort of movement inside of an organization. I always loved working with her. I thought she was amazing. And when she moved out, when it got acquired and changed and private equity kind of got into it, she moved into other roles. But in 2020, she did a race for Congress in California. Now she didn't win, so that was but it was the first. There was a big announcement at the time saying she would have been the first tech female, particularly HR tech female, but tech female to have won a congressional race if she'd won it. She lost it in the general election. But so when this came up from Adam Miller, I was like, oh, it's a little weird, maybe. I don't know what the right word is. It's just interesting, I guess, to see someone you've been in the rooms with, and this happens to everybody, right? Like I can remember a friend of mine who used to actually know Barack Obama before he was in the races, like particularly in the presidential race. He was more in his local races. And she said it was so weird when that happened because it was hard for her to sort of like, oh, this is a person that I know, right? And I've done things with, right? So this is the same case. I'm like, oh, we know Adam Miller. I used to be at a lot of events with Adam Miller. Those who know what Adam Miller back in the day know what those events were like, right? He had a lot of statement about how he feels things would need to be changed. They mentioned a lot the work that he's been doing on a philanthropic level with him and his
with
wife.
Better Angels, which is
with Better Angels and helping
working on homelessness, which is a huge issue in LA. Useless, in fact, is anti-homeless. Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but it's just just a little bit of newsflash in the market, right? For people we know, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But if you are in the area,
we should know Adam Miller used to be. I don't know if I said this. Did we say Adam Miller was the founder of Cornerstone, right? The learning software. I don't know if we.
No, I don't think we did mention that. Yeah. But,
yeah. So that's how we know Adam. Most of the people who would know any history, he was one of the first SaaS HR products in the world. His visions were like he was so ahead of where the market was heading. I worked with him a lot because I was a person at the days, and him and Josh were sort of step hand in hand on where the market was at. So anyway, sorry. I didn't realize we had said that. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. And if you are in the LA area and eligible to vote, and homelessness is important to you, Nithya Raman, who's in the city council, is running and is the best choice. So there you go. If you want my correct opinion. Political. Yeah, if you want my correct opinion on it, you want Nithya Raman. She will actually do work.
We take no sides on.
That's true. It's true.
It's all billionaire. That's my own opinion.
That's right. This is Cliff's opinion, not even the opinion of the show. Yeah. So then we get some hard facts after those opinions. We get the ADP National Employment Report. So this is pretty interesting. This is our first one of 2026. It is still additions to jobs, 22,000 in January. There's still revisions going on. This is brand new, basically. And it is what was expected from what we saw last year from our own data. They had expected it to be slow. They didn't expect it to be this slow. However, they did break down, and you got to remember this is coming from ADP. Right, it's still the largest payroll database that's out there, but it is very skewed towards small business. To be fair, the U.S. economy is skewed towards small business. But what did they see? They saw that most of the job gains were in the 50 to 500, where 41,000 of that group of the 74,000 were going up, as well as strong growth in the 1 to 19 employer. That's a lot of those self-employed too, right? Now, when we looked at our own data, when we asked people to predict, we also saw the same sort of thing happen, where we saw that there was going to be increase in job growth, but also strong decrease, meaning the net job growth wouldn't be as strong as expected. And we also saw that most of the job growth that was happening was going to be in the under 500 RSMB market, with tepid job growth at the enterprise level.
Yeah, which we had about 14% of enterprises over 5,000 plus was going to, plan to do some decreases. And so I sent the data off to Cliff and I said, Cliff, see if this matches what our data said it was going to be. And I were like, okay, it's nice to know we're in line with one of the largest payroll data sets. What you told us you were going to do, you pretty closely did, right? Like we're halfway through the year. There will be more to come on this, but I think we're going to get pretty close.
Another reason, I'm always plugging the survey. Another reason to take it, because that helps. It really helps organizations understand, what's going on out there, and it can fuel employment to get a realistic view. Because otherwise, all of these other reports are looking back. This is looking forward when you give us that information.
Well, and I think if you look at the market right now, you'd be like, everybody's laying off, and yes, big companies are, and that is more people. We get that, but there is a lot of growth happening at mid-market SMB, right?
Yeah. We also get a little interesting one. There had been some discussion amongst the sort of data nerds and junkies online about what was going on with the revisions. ADP revised their last 16 years of their data report, and almost always down, right? A little less than they said it was going to be pretty much throughout the time since they've been putting out this report, since 2010. ADP said that the data series has been reweighted to match the KCEW, which is the quarterly sense of employment and wages. That's a different data set than they used to use. So the KCEW, rather than the sort of current employment statistics, which is a sample, they just take a sample and then extrapolate. KCEW is 10.8 million establishments. Basically, they just get all of the actual employment report. So it's been revised downwards in theory to be better in line with the quote unquote true numbers. I mean, either way, it's slightly less throughout history. I guess you could say that if you're looking at these numbers, you can count them being, this is probably the low end, right? They seem to be rather wanting to stay on that low end.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting that we've made some huge cuts here in the United States in our Bureau of Labor Statistics. Some of that had to be addressed. Like we got to make sure we're following, like ADP's got to match to numbers they trust. There's a little bit of that happening in the market, right? So you got to find a data set you can trust to align with, because economists don't do this stuff in a silo if they're really good. Right. And ADP's got good economists, and they were like, okay, now I got to know what my data set I can trust. And we don't know that's the case in some cases right now with BLS. So yeah. Yeah,
honestly, with the BLS cuts, the Bureau of Labor Statistics cuts, we're flying blind a little bit, and there's not a lot of trust, bringing that word up again too. Something that you can trust, I don't know, I'm jumping on this one, is the Work Defined Network. One of the members there, David Turetsky, has launched a video channel. So David Turetsky's HR Data Labs. So there we go, data and trust. And he started the HR channel, which you can find on Roku and Fire, the TV thing, Fire. You tell I'm on it on TV. Fire. I don't know. But yeah, so if you have Roku, Fire TV, you can find the video versions of these podcasts. By the time you hear this, I believe are on there. This just got started. But that'll be pretty exciting. You can also
So are we going to be on this, Cliff? That's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, we will be. Okay. I'll make sure of it. I'll strong arm some people. But no, it's all part of the Work Defined network, which we're a part of. You can also just go to thehrchannel.tv and get video versions of the podcast. So that's fun, right? Who doesn't want to see us?
We love you, David.
If you can see how lovely Stacey's hair looks right now, you would know you should be seeing the video.
I haven't been to the hair salon in a while. Yeah, I haven't been traveling.
But you had also asked where we're going to be, Stacey, and it's a lot. So buckle up,
it's
everybody.
A lot, and we've been talking for a while now, Cliff. So I'll let you start off the conversation.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we're going to be in Scottsdale in March 9th through 11th. Feel free to reach out to us. March 16th through the 20th, Tammy Smith, who's our head of data science, will be at the Qualtrics event in Seattle. She loves talking data, and she loves especially talking anyone wants to be a distributor. You want some information about being a distributor? It's her number one topic. Don't talk to her about jury duty. She's not in the mood right now.
She's been out of the office for 2 days with jury duty, which is, again, good citizen, very happy as a small business owner. I'm like, it's hard to be missing data.
Also, at those exact same dates, March 16th to 20th at Unleash, which I believe both you and I were at, Stacey, last year. This year will be Allison Baker, which one? Williams, and Summer Oriano. So something you'll hear a lot this year is we're really getting to be not just Stacey and I, right? We've got a lot of events to go to, and we want to make sure you get to meet the entire team, especially as they're becoming more and more understanding and have more and more connections throughout the industry. They want to sort of spread their wings and meet some of you and take more of an analyst role on. So please welcome them and get a chance to meet them. Both wonderful people. So if you'll be at Unleash, you meet either of them. You can reach out to the show. You can reach out to any of their first names at sapientinsights.com. But the beginning of those dates, the 16th, that will be something you've mentioned before, Stacey, 321 Coffee.
321 Coffee Conference Day here in Raleigh at the Raleigh IMAX Center, and we're sponsoring that. So that to us is really important. Those who know get our Christmas gifts. If you want to get our Christmas gift lift, you got to come and do something nice with us. It gets really good coffee, and more importantly, it supports a really good organization. And so we'll be there to support that organization. Yeah,
absolutely. We were talking about hiring veterans earlier. They do a lot of hiring of people with developmental disabilities, and I don't think there's a better reason to support and drink coffee than that. Right after that, the week after, March 23rd to the 25th at Transform. Stacey, you'll be there with Terry Zipper from our sister podcast and also the CEO of our organization. That's in Vegas.
Yeah, we'll be having a session on sort of expanding the use of AI and how you really think about it on a workforce planning front. So join us for that. We'll be excited. And then I'll be heading to, right after that, April 13th through 16th, I guess it's not right after, a few weeks we got break in there, to Infor's analyst event. That's going to be in Atlanta, Georgia at one of their new locations. Allison might be joining me for that as well. And then Cliff, you're going to be heading down to Orlando for ADP's Executive Summit, right?
Yeah, I always love the Orlando trips. It's only about an hour away. Get to take a train, something you don't get to do in the United States, at least not in the South very much. But we'll be jumping right from there. Most likely to Canva Create. Talking about that blurring of HR and work tech. I'll be going to that, and possibly Caitlin from our team as well over in Los Angeles. And I'll probably stick around because I'll be going right from there to the Workday just a few days later on the 21st to the 24th. And in between that, you've got the exciting one, April 20th to 24th at HR Tech Europe. Also with Summer Oriano. Stacey, you'll be where?
We'll be in Amsterdam, and we'll be doing both an introduction session. So we're doing some coaching and mentoring, an introduction session for new people entering the HR tech space. So a beginning session and sort of a wrap-up session to give everybody a chance to talk. So please join us. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll also be delivering some of our international data, which hasn't been released yet at that conference. So if you're going to the HR tech conference in Europe, let us know. We would love to catch up and talk to you.
Wonderful. And then right after that, I think we were told no more trips in April because
basically, Caitlin, who manages our calendar, said, okay, this is the last thing you're allowed to do. I'll be heading back. I'll be heading back from Europe to San Francisco again to do the Oracle Innovation Oracle Summit that they too have from an analyst perspective, and you'll be heading to Orlando again.
Back to Orlando to WorkHuman. That's right? Always an amazing event. I'll be with Allison Williams at that one as well. And then I'll jump right from there as soon as that's ending, heading to New Jersey to the Bell Labs building. Beautiful there, by the way, in Northern Jersey. If you haven't been, April 29th to 30th for iSIMS event. And then Rippling, which, by the way, will have a few different events on the road. This is not Rippling's only sort of traveling event. The one we'll be at will most likely be the one in early June in San Francisco. There will also be in Chicago. And Rita, help me out here. Rita's yelling at
New York. They had New York one. They had a Chicago one.
Okay, there we go. New York and Chicago will be their other events. You can check that out if you want to see their other road events. But I believe we've done it, and that's just 2 months of travel. That
is 2 months travel, and we have wrapped up this whole day. We appreciate you guys all sticking around as we do realize that it was a long one. It's always a long one. There's just so much going on, and it's going to get busier, and before it gets slower. So that's just enjoy the drive time, and you're sipping your car, drinking your coffee.
Your 3-2-1 coffee.
That's right, your 3-2-1 coffee. All right, guys, we are wrapping up today. As usual, a big push. If you have something you're trying to figure out from an HR technology perspective, we've got the report for you. Please make sure you go look at it, buy it, download it, do what you need to do to log into a research center. If you want to make sure that you are hearing about all the things we're doing on a regular basis, sign up for our newsletter, and that will give you all the updates on launches and speaking and where we're going to be at, all the stuff Cliff just talked about. Also, be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, which HR We Have a Problem, which I think Cliff is going to be taking over in another couple months, right? Terry?
Absolutely. Especially, I should point out here, too, that we want to start really getting some of these voices, some of the executives. We don't necessarily have to be, from one of the HR software providers. You're one of the executives doing HR. We want to start kind of mixing in all these different voices from all the different people that we're hearing from. So feel free to reach out. Love to have some of these really wonderful conversations, kind of things Stacey and I are talking about. Those are things we love to talk about.
Yeah, and then if you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, leave a rating and a review, where you grab your podcast at the Work-Defined environment. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind-the-scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn and Instagram. You get some pretty pictures there. Cliff, as always, thank you for putting this together. I know this is a huge lift every week, but we hear over and over again that people are listening to it. If there's anything you'd like us to change about what we're doing, please let us know. We always want to take your feedback. Also, a big thank you to Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast, run by their amazing founder, Kelly. It wouldn't get out there without her. Our marketing team, Summer Alano, Cole Harris, Linda Galloway, Diamond and the whole team who are working on this. And thanks to our listeners and community we couldn't do this without you. You are what make this possible. And that's it for this episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. Lots going on, so we'll try and bring back more HR Tech news in just 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. Bye, everyone.